to First Strike here on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. For the next hour, we're going to break down UFC 293 as the UFC stays away from the continental United States and stays overseas. This week, we are in Australia. Oh, my goodness, the return of Israel Adesanya. Of course, the last style bender going to put that middleweight strap on the line against Sean Strickland. Before we get there with Lou Finocchiaro, Jordan Sherwood, Dan Reeland, and Britton Hess, let's do a recap of what we saw last week at UFC Paris. And really no resistance for the Frenchman in the main event as Cyril Gane, an easy victory in round 2 TKO over Sergey Spivak. The polar bear we saw in the co-main event, Marianne Firo, she got it done against Rose Namajunas. Some interesting exchange of words between those two ladies. After that, a really good day for the French fighters, both women and men across the board. But without further ado, let's get to the man we know as Gamblu on Twitter. He is the host of the About Business podcast. He is the one and only Lou Finocchiaro. Lou, I start there with the venues because we saw it at UFC Singapore. We certainly saw it in Paris. Do you handicap a little bit differently knowing the flavor, being in Australia, how these cards are tilted, if you see a quote-unquote home fighter in a fight that you think might go the distance?
It has to be considered, Dave. And before we get too involved in that, let me just say thanks for having me on. These programs are awesome. But yes, not only does the venue come into play with the handicapping because usually the cage size is the larger 30-foot cage, but also because of the geography. And we saw, 7 of 8 or 6 of 7 French fighters were victorious last week, mostly because a lot of them were very good. And in the case of the loser, she's not very good. So it's important for the handicapper to not only be able to diagnose good fights, but to be able to bet on those fights. Last week, Paris, 10-1 favorites. So those of us searching for underdogs better be aware that in the last 4 fight cards, it's been a stampede of favorites. And when is that going to begin to revert? Hopefully this week.
Yeah, a lot of dogs did not go to heaven, if you know what I mean, in the gambling sense, certainly last week in Paris. So you look at one of the biggest dogs on there, and it's right there at the main event. And it is Sean Strickland, USA's own, very outspoken about Israel Adesanya. And we can understand why the last style bender is a huge favorite here. Minus 650 is what we're seeing today on a Tuesday. The comeback on Sean is plus 470. Now, here's the thing. We're not normally in the business of laying these huge prices. But if you're looking for pathways to victory for Sean, it's very difficult. He says, Lou, he is implementing wrestling, at least in this camp. And then he makes these bizarre assertions that, yeah, but sometimes I get in the octagon and not so smart Sean shows up. What Sean Strickland shows up? And does it even matter which version shows?
If I could answer that question, Dave, I wouldn't be here. I'd be a bazillionaire, because that's the real flux of this fight is Strickland's ability to stick to the plan. I guarantee, listen, Eric Nixick has developed plans for a lot of great fighters out of Extreme Couture in Vegas. Strickland's one of them. But when the lights go on, he reverts to really a reckless nature. And if he could control that, especially a couple of fights ago against Pereira, he had the opportunity to expose Pereira by taking him down before Pereira had a chance to work on takedown defense. He didn't do it, and the result was he got KO'd in the first round. So in this fight, honestly, if I knew Strickland didn't just work on grappling for this fight. He's worked on grappling. He's a grappler. He's capable on the ground. That said, he's a 170er fighting at 85 now, and Izzy's fought at 205 fighting at 85. He's a bit undersized, and his ability to stick to a plan concerns me. If I knew he was focused like Robert Whittaker coming into this fight, then I would tell you that this price is obtuse, and Strickland's abilities are far outweigh plus 470. But I can't make any statement on Strickland based on the volatility of his mental frame.
Yeah, because you look at it, right? He's got a 3-inch height disadvantage. He's got a 4-inch reach disadvantage to the champion. So if this fight stays standing, then you got to get into this Israel Adesanya, inside the distance props, right? Is that the way you'd look to shorten it if you wanted to back the champion side?
I'm not so sure, Dave, because Adesanya is PO'd. And this reminds me a little bit of, and nobody watching is going to remember this, but take my word for it. Years ago, when Cassius Clay changed his name to Muhammad Ali, a guy named Ernie Terrell wouldn't call him Ali, kept calling him Clay, and he was badgering Ali like Strickland is badgering Adesanya. And so rather than just go wipe him out, Clay toyed with his food and just sliced this poor Terrell up to ribbons, all the while asking him what his MF name was. So will Adesanya take the same approach? I think so. I think he's out to hurt Strickland and do damage to him. And I think we're going to see, it's going to be interesting to see if Strickland's plan to take Adesanya out of his mental frame works.
That is fascinating. And by the way, I know exactly the story that you're recounting with Muhammad Ali back in the day. So there could be a lot of trash talk going on in the octagon. 4.5 is where this total is sitting at right now. Even money either way, minus $1.10. So kind of telling you there the applied odds that maybe to your point, Lou, he wants to carry him, as we saw Floyd Mayweather kind of carry Conor McGregor. Maybe he carries Strickland until the end. We'll figure out if that comes before 4.5 rounds or not. On the co-main, this is a really interesting fight because I think if you said Alexander Volkov against Tai Tuivasa in anywhere else other than Australia, I mean, the skill set of Volkov it's omnipresent, right? And that's why he's a 250 betting favorite. But we know the shoey and Tai Tuivasa, and we know the power that he has. Is he live to you as a over $2 betting underdog right now?
He's way more live on Saturday than he was in that showing against Pavlovich, and he was dead and on a second fight in a few months. He had stayed in the States, so the Pavlovich fight you should wipe out. He's better than that. That said, in this fight, he's giving up so much height, reach, athleticism, even experience to Volkov. The question will be, how does Tai navigate space to get inside to deliver shots in a big cage with a rangy guy like Volkov? I think he's got a tall task ahead of him. I don't think Tai is the level of mixed martial artist, honestly, that Volkov is. So outside the puncher's chance, I lean to Volkov in a really boring 15-minute decision.
Okay, 15-minute decision, and right now that total is sitting at right at 1.5. So if you seem to think that maybe this will get dragged on a little bit here, is that over a better play for you versus laying it with Volkov?
Yeah, now that I'm seeing that 1.5, I love that over there. I think that's being disrespectful to each fighter. Volkov was knocked out once, and it was at the last minute of a fight by the Black Beast who got lucky, right?
Yeah.
So Volkov's durable. Tai is not going to knock him out, I don't believe, early. And all that being said, Volkov is a pitter-patter guy. He's not a huge power guy at 6'7" or whatever he is, and I think the over is enticing.
Yeah, minus $1.15. Again, that fight you're referencing there, Derek Lewis was being outclassed for basically 2 3/4 of a third round until that final punch came and knocked out Alexander Volkov. So that over is very intriguing right now at minus $1.15. I want to get to a fighter that I know you've got your eye on, and this might be a guy in Anton Turkaloo that you look at and you go, he's got the best nickname in the UFC. Is that correct, Lou?
Well, I mean, he's got the most bold nickname in the UFC, the Pleasure Man. He's a Swedish fighter. He's game. In this setup, I think he works himself into a favorable matchup. He's going to be the taller, younger fighter. I think he's the fight. Both these guys are pretty well-rounded. But I think that based on who I've seen Anton fight prior, and he's lost both, but to killers, I've found respect in his game. He comes out, he addressed Jake Almeida and went right after him, and few are able to do that. Few will even get in the cage with him. As far as Pedro's concerned, this is his second stint in the UFC. He's really had dubious results. The 2 wins he has are against guys that aren't in the UFC anymore, and every single professional win in this guy's career is in the first round. If Anton can weather this fight into the second round, I believe he stands a tremendous opportunity here. I actually released him last Saturday during these fights at plus 110, knowing that plus number was going to go away. He's now minus 115, and I would encourage investors that are interested in Anton to take him now, because I think that thing could go to 120 or 125 by the time everybody starts to wake up and start betting on these fights.
Turkali, I got to remember that J. They don't even use the J.
Anton.
The pleasure, man. We got about a minute to go. Are there any other fights on this entire card? Because obviously you get to a pay-per-view like this. We got some deeper options out there, Lou. And again, you gave out Anton earlier at plus money. Now that's already reversed at minus $1.15. Anything else, Lou, across the board that really intrigues you here on a Tuesday that you might want to keep an eye on?
Jenkins Marichal. That's Chepe. That's the fight of the card. Jenkins is good, but Chepe fought up at 155 on short notice. He gets a full camp going down to 145. He ships in. He's an underdog, and he's an underdog Uncle Louie will be taking a long, hard look at.
Love it that Uncle Louie's looking at that one. Very quickly, 30 seconds. Tell the people about the Bout Business podcast each and every Friday.
We had a full sweep of the card last week. We're running hot, and this week we're going to look at some dogs, as just mentioned. Thanks so much for having me on, and I can't wait till the show breaks so I can listen to the other handicappers. Thanks, Dave.
Well, you were all over it with Cyril Gong last week. I wish why didn't I listen to Lou? He nailed that pick in the main event. All right, when we come back, we're going to Chicago to catch up with Jordan Sherwood next here on First Strike. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you plenty of ways to bet the UFC. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You're going to be able to bet on more than just the main event. DraftKings has great odds on fight lines, total rounds, and futures for all MMA events. Eligibility restrictions do apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for all the terms and conditions. Dave Ross back here in Las Vegas. It is now time to go to the second city and catch up with our guy, Jordan Sherwood. You can follow Jordan as I do on X. At Wood on ESPN 1000. I'm still not used to it, Jordan. This whole X Twitter thing. Like, are you cool with the transition? You good with it?
I just refer to it as Twitter. Yeah. None. Whether it's MMA or not MMA, no. I'm completely on Twitter. That's what I'm referring it to. That's
still
what I
Twitter.
know it as. But if you're doing this thing makes me think of actually CM Punk.
Oh, so really?
Doing the X, yeah, because this is his moniker.
It's my guy, Phil Brooks.
Yeah, right.
Maybe we'll get Phil on the show now that he's got some free time. You can follow Jordan at Wood on ESPN 1000, of course, the host of the Unnamed MMA podcast. Jordan, before we get to the main event here, which it doesn't feel that intriguing, certainly from a book side right now. I want to get to Gabriel Miranda against Shane Young, a fight earlier in this card that you've got your eye on here at some plus value for the dog. Dogs did not cash in France. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, I just think that you're running into a situation where Gabriel Miranda is going to be able to utilize a skill set that Shane Young just hasn't been able to handle successfully, whether it be in his UFC career or outside regionally. He's a great striker. Obviously, he's a lot of fun to see perform in the octagon, and there's a reason why he's on the card because it's his home country and he's an exciting fighter. But Miranda, I think, just has the recipe if he avoids a firefight and just does what he's supposed to do, get this fight to the ground and look for submissions. He might be able to steal one, or he might be able to control Young enough to warrant a judge's decision, even though obviously we were talking last week about UFC Paris. And, look, I was on the right side of the Jocelyn Edwards fight, but Jocelyn Edwards won that fight. So it's certainly risky, but that's how Miranda's going to win. Miranda's not going to win a fight if he's just going to stand and trade with Shane Young. He's too powerful, too exciting, too explosive. But Young has lost 3 fights in a row. So likely, I guess what I'm getting at, Dave, it's a fade on Young and a belief in Miranda. We really haven't seen his true colors in the short amount of time we've seen him in the UFC.
You stole my whole volume of the next question, which was, how much does it worry you? Again, we talk about this a lot. And the reason why we talk about it is it came to fruition in France. And we've seen this with, I don't want to call them hometown decisions, but the judges seem to be affected by the crowd. Do you almost look at it and say, boy, I hope you get the finish or the stoppage here earlier so I don't have to rely on those judges' scorecards?
Yeah, and luckily, like at a guy like Miranda, like he's not going to want to risk that. Like his bread and butter is getting guys to the ground and submitting them. So he takes basically that issue out of the way that you're looking at that fight. Young is perfect for that because he likes to just stand there and throw bombs, land those significant strikes, and maybe get the advantage in the judges' minds. But I don't think so. I think we're likely seeing a finish, either Miranda getting it done on the ground, Young on the feet with a knockout. And I'm going to side with the underdog, just believing, again, 3-fight losing streak for Young. He's probably on his way out of the UFC.
Take it out of the judges' hands. That's what they always tell you. So I think that's what Jordan's getting at there with some plus money on that side. On the main card, you look at Tyson Pedro against Anton Turkalj here. The Pleasure Man is now a favorite. Opened up as a dog at minus $1.15. What do you make of the Pedro side here? 4 years older than Anton in this one. Are you backing Tyson?
Look, I think that this is a matchup where they want to cater to the hometown crowd. They want them getting excited, early on to open up the main card. And look, I think we talked about it, in his last fight against Modestas Bukauskas, also in Perth. We saw that as a favorable matchup for the underdog, and he cashed. But prior to that, Tyson Pedro is an explosive fighter, fought a round and a half. He's got obviously very good Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He's got good striking. And if he's right, if he's healthy, he's right. I really think that this could be a layup for him. And look, Turkalj looked good enough to survive almost a rout against Jailton Almeida before he got submitted. So,
yeah.
But that's what you're siding in. You're siding with a guy that was on his back and surviving. And I just think that Tyson Pedro is going to be able to do that again. Get this fight quickly to the ground and look for a very quick submission. I mean, you talked about it. All the Holden countrymen, or most of them, are heavy favorites, and there's a reason for that. Is because of the stylistic matchups that they're going to have, and catering to that home crowd. Because this card was kind of put together, rather quickly. With a lot of fights falling out, so they want at least the hometown crowd going home happy.
Yeah, rewatching the Turkalj matchup against, look, Jailton Almeida he's a beast, obviously, and certainly you get down to the ground. He did survive, right, until he couldn't survive any longer, but basically fought as best he could for about 4 minutes before that stoppage came. To that end, you look at the total rounds prop here, 2.5. It's juiced heavily to the under. You mentioned Pedro's gas tank, that maybe it's about a round and a half. Are there any other ways that you're looking at this, or is it just, let me just stay in the Pedro side and I don't have to deal with these totals and or pathways to victory?
Yeah, there just isn't a lot of I guess film, if you will, in Turkalj, what he's been able to do in the UFC. Obviously 2 fights, and the second one he went to the judges' scorecards. But I think that you got to believe that Tyson Pedro has a decisive advantage on the ground. He's not going to waste any time messing with Turkalj on the feet. So yeah, the under is certainly juiced heavily, and that's because there's a belief in the finish that either Pedro gets it done really early, or maybe Turkalj steals one in the second round because of his strikes. But I stay away from that. I think that you're probably parlaying a lot of the home countrymen in to get some value in a 3-4 fight parlay. But obviously, Dave, there's a risk in doing that. So for me in my play, it's probably Pedro via submission, Pedro and the under at 1.5. If you want to combine, some sort of formula with those couple of plays to get some plus money.
Still upset about my Valentina Shevchenko, Alexa Grasso parlay buster. Trying to get over that one. Jordan, you mentioned countrymen and women certainly in this fight card. I do want to get to the main event here with Israel Adesanya. Sean Strickland said, I don't know what country he's from. That's part of the digs he's going at on the last Stylebender in this fight. Obviously in Australia, the last Stylebender is a 650 betting favorite. We understand why. And you kind of look at it on paper and you go, what's the pathway to victory for Sean if it's not wrestling? And again, I just look at it and I go, Jordan, if he actually wrestles, I give him a wrestler's chance. Is Sean Strickland mentally smart enough, if we will, to fight a disciplined fight to make this even a worthwhile dog to back?
Yeah, I mean, look, why do we every single Sean Strickland fight like is he mentally competent, to do something he's supposed to do, and you like to believe it, and he's a fun fighter and exciting, and you love the trash talking that exists. And if this fight card was getting more play, he would be getting more run in the lead up to this fight. But look, he stood in front of Alice Pereira and just got knocked out. And I was on the Strickland side.
So was I.
Gonna finally fight smart, take this fight to the ground, and do so. Look, let's remember a couple things. He's taking this fight on short notice, and I know Sean Strickland's the type of guy that lives in the gym, he's ready. I'm not worried about that. But he is taking this fight on short notice. He didn't really beat a tough guy to get here. And I just don't believe that he is, again, going to have that smart game plan to look for the takedown. The interesting thing, I think the storyline of the week is Israel Adesanya coming out and saying, look, I've never had a submission in my mixed martial arts career. Sean Strickland's never been submitted in his mixed martial arts career. So why not have the high-level kickboxer look for a submission against, the high-level wrestler, we'll call it, in Sean Strickland? There's value certainly there, believing if Adesanya can pull that rabbit out of his hat.
16-1 if Izzy gets the submission, which he's never had before. Again, are we going to see these guys all of a sudden become grapplers and this thing hits the ground and we're looking for subs? Is that what we really think we're going to see?
I don't believe so. I think, Israel Adesanya is going to get in there. He's going to obviously, again, come to the belief that he's got a decisive advantage over Sean Strickland on the feet. And I think that people just got to remember that, yes, Israel Adesanya has had 2 stoppages in his last 2 fights. But prior to that, this is a guy that goes to the judges' scorecard. This is a guy that just outpoints fighters, avoids danger. That's risky because Sean Strickland will be in his face for 25 minutes. But I really think Adesanya via points is the smart play. And you're at plus money right now for the fight to go to decision. Mm-hmm. The last that I looked at it.
Yeah,
that's how he wins. That's how he wins fights these days, Dave. That's how Israel Adesanya wins fights.
And again, it's interesting because Izzy by decision is plus $1.15. The fight just to go the distance plus $1.10. Telling you Sean Strickland cannot win a decision is basically what that's implying. That's got to be Sean, whether it's his hands or other ways inside the distance to get this thing done. Very quickly, got about 45 seconds. Tell the people about the Unnamed MMA podcast.
Yep. Every single week, me and Adam Abdallah on the ESPN Chicago app or wherever you find podcasts, we break down every fight. We recap the fight that was. So we'll talk about a good day at UFC Paris on the Cyril Gane side of things, and then kind of like look for those advantages, opportunities to gain some value, whether it be in the form of a parlay or a particular method of victory for the fighters. Each and every single week, we break down the fights.
How's Chicago feeling before the Packers come to town?
Bears Packers week. Let's go! Let's go.
There he is, everybody, the one and only Jordan Sherwood. Can't wait to see what happens there, and certainly at UFC 293. Come on back. We're shipping up to Boston next with Dan Vreeland. Start your mornings with VSiN Daily Morning Bets. Josh Applebaum gives you every piece of info you need to be ready for betting the day's biggest games in just 15 minutes. He discusses line movement, injuries, what you need to be looking at before you place those wagers. So make the VSiN Daily Morning Bets podcast part of your morning routine. Download and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Josh is a Boston legend. So too is our guy Dan Vreeland. You can follow him on X or Twitter at Gumby Vreeland. He is the writer at Gambling Podcast and Cage Side Press and a host of Top Turtle MMA and SGPN MMA. Whew. It's always a mouthful, Dan, because you are a very, very busy man. First of all, in Boston these days, we haven't had an American side card since they left Boston. 3 in a row. Well, it's Singapore, then we go to France, and now we're going to Australia. How do you handicap some of these prelim fights on fights that you think might hit the cards? Again, I ask this because I think it's very important for fight fans out there when you're betting these things to know who are the local fighters, and if the fight has the propensity to hit the cards, you might want to back more of the local flavor. We saw it in France again.
Yeah, we did see it in France. I generally am just, as far as handicapping judges, outside of Texas, Texas is a huge difference maker. Outside of Texas, I just try to say to myself, like, look, there's going to be 1 or 2 wacky cards, and trying to handicap which ones those are going to be is tough, right? Because there are fights that are clearly one-sided, and you're going to see the visitor come in and win this fight. In Texas, you can count on every fight being a split decision with a terrible 30-27 mixed in there somewhere. So apart from that, I mean, I just generally try to think of it as is something I don't think too much about.
Yeah, it comes with the territory that you're going to be on the wrong side of some things that you go, wow, how'd that happen? And probably on the plus side as well. Let's get to a couple fights here we have not discussed so far in this program. And Justin Tafa back in there against Austin Lane. It's nice to see a Tafa not fighting Parker Porter. So we get a different opponent here. Tafa is a right now over $2 betting favorite against Lane. Is there a live dog scenario here? Or do you think that we're going to see the older Tafa here at 29 maybe cash this ticket as over $2 betting favorite?
You know, I keep wanting to say that heavyweight fighters are going to learn something, and you know, and they keep proving me wrong every single time. And it would be the right move to grapple Justin Tafa. I think Austin Lane, when he does have top control, actually looks pretty good. I think he's probably going to box too long, if I'm being honest. Like, most heavyweights stay on the feet for a little bit too long against Justin Tafa. That's why he's had any success in the UFC. He's also got good enough takedown defense that, like, I don't think Austin Lane really has the wrestling to get him to the mat. You know, again, if you wanted to take a dabble on Austin Lane by submission, like he might get him down enough that he might get that sub, maybe there's some value there. But I mean, really, the value here for me is I like Justin Tafa. I like the under too, even though it's heavily juiced on the under. Austin Lane just fights too upright and eats too many punches. He's going to take one here from Tafa.
So if you're looking at the Tafa side, you're going to play the KO prop at minus $1.65 instead of laying the 218?
I mean, it's starting to get to the point where that number is so close that, like, do I really need the extra 50 cents there to completely take the decision out of it? Because, you know, I think he's going to knock him out. I think he's going to throw one of those overhand rights and land it right on the big, tall guy's chin. But at the same time, like, as that number inches closer and closer together, especially as we get close to fight time, you have to ask yourself, is it worth taking the decision out of the picture for 50 cents?
Yeah, I think there's very astute observation there. Sometimes we go, well, it's got to be this way. And then all of a sudden it hits the cards inexplicably and you're sitting on the KO side. And then that goes by the wayside when it is just 50 cents more at minus 218. Let's look at Manuel Kopp here against Felipe Dos Santos. And so Santos is a big dog in this one again against Kopp, over a $3, almost a $4 betting favorite here. He's looked very explosive at 125. What do you make of this fight here, Dan?
I think if you gave me the Manuel Kopp, who debuted in the UFC, and for his first two fights, I would give Felipe Dos Santos a chance here. Dos Santos is a fun striker. He's electric. He's really energetic. I had him handicapped to win his Contender Series fight handedly. I thought he was in great position to get a UFC contract. But we're talking about a guy short notice, traveling halfway across the world for his debut. And the Manuel Kopp I've seen lately is deadly. You know, like, he has now changed completely who he was, where before he was point fighting and just saying, you know, it's okay if I go 3 hard rounds with Pantoja, because I think I can go 3 hard rounds with Pantoja. And they wound up not being all that hard rounds at the end of the day. And he thought he won, and he clearly didn't win. But the version that I've seen of him the last few times out, the killer be killed, the guy who's stalking in there and looking to finish, I don't like the idea of a young 20-year-old taking a short notice fight halfway across the world going up against that version of Manuel Kopp. I think his striking's too good. I think he can mix in the wrestling enough. I think also, you know, the heat of the moment is in the adrenaline is just going to get to Dos Santos. So, yeah, I'm on Manuel Kopp's side on this. I don't love that number because, you know, I don't like laying that kind of chalk anytime. If I'm looking for something, knowing that Felipe Dos Santos is really tough, you might find yourself on the over here at plus 140. Or if you like Manuel Kopp by decision, because I would just say this, Dos Santos is tough, and he's a young kid in there, and yeah, the heat of the moment might get to him. But I could see him surviving 15 hard minutes here. And
this is where the difference is. Instead of laying the almost $4 betting price tag right now on Kopp, you can get him by decision at plus money at plus 350. So I think that's a better way to take a shot here if we do like the man outside here, as Dan does. I want to get to another fight here, and you look at Carlos Ulberg, and boy, he looks the part. Right, certainly so far. And he's another big favorite, minus 270 right now against Dawoon Jung. Is there any possibility of an upset here, or is Ulberg who we think he is?
I think Ulberg's who we think he is. And if you look at the two sort of trajectories that these guys are on, you know, Ulberg had that first fight with Kennedy and Nzechukwu, and it looks really bad on paper at the end of the day, because you remember, you know, he was winning that fight. He was piecing him up, tired out, got finished. And you've seen pretty much the opposite trajectory out of Da Un Jung. He had a couple of really great fights out of the gate. He actually beat Kennedy Nzechukwu. And when you look back at those fights that made me think he was like that guy, because I did think Da Un Jung was really good at one point. You're talking about Mike Rodriguez. You're talking about Thick Willie, William Knight. You're talking about a draw with Sam Alvey. Those wins in that draw certainly did not age all that well. Since then, he's been finished by Dustin Jacoby. He got badly out-wrestled by Devin Clark. Granted, those are two kind of better names. But the bottom line is against a longer, taller, much better striker, I think he just gets pieced up from distance here. And I think it's probably not close, too. So the odds being as wide as they are, I think they're kind of fitting.
All right, so maybe Olberg by KO to look at that if you want to try to shorten that price tag. Nasrat Haqparast is back on this card. He's almost a $5 betting favorite against Landon Quinones. Again, I'm trying to find some value in some of these dogs, but Dan, it feels like a very chalky card here with Nasrat back in there again, minus 470 today.
Yeah, and you know me. I'm the guy out there trying to look for the big underdogs. I'm a big underdog swinger here. The problem with Quinones is he just looked like he didn't have the fight IQ to handle the fight when he fought a higher level of competition. You know, we saw him on The Ultimate Fighter. He went in there and he fought Jason Knight. And the first thing he did was he was like, let's grapple with Jason Knight. Which, I mean, like, how do you trust a guy like that? How do you trust a guy who wants to grapple with Jason Knight and immediately puts himself into a triangle? Now, on the other hand, you could say, sure, he's looked good in the fights he's been in. He strikes all right from distance. He mixes it up here and there. But, like, I don't want that guy on short notice going in to fight somebody like a gamer in Nasrat Haqparast. Haqparast is a guy who knows what he's doing in there. And, you know, a couple of nice wins in Titan FC don't give me enough confidence to think you can hang with Haqparast. So, yeah, I think Haqparast here. I also, you know, Haqparast isn't much of a finisher to me. So, like, maybe if you're looking for some value here, start to look for the decision prop when the fight rolls around.
Can I interest you in John McDessie as over a $2 dog against Jamie Malarkey? And again, hometown flavor here. Malarkey right now, about 265 betting favorite. Comeback of McDessie is plus 215.
I mean, you're really trying to tempt me with all these dogs, and you know me. I want one. But I don't like John McDessie in this spot. And the reason is he's had a massive height and reach disadvantage here. And we've seen him deal with that before. The Ignacio Bahamondes fight, he managed. But Bahamondes is a lot more raw than Jamie Malarkey. Jamie Malarkey uses that jab at distance a little bit better. He's a little less flashy. He's a little bit more, you know, sticking to the basics, and I think that actually plays well against McDessie here. I think you also see him mix in the wrestling once in a while if he absolutely needs to. You're going to see like a gamesman type performance from Jamie Malarkey trying to get the home win here. John McDessie, I just can't imagine, gets close enough to him without eating 45 jabs, and ultimately I think we see him lose a volume battle.
Got a minute to go. Could I interest you in the biggest dog in the card? And that's the main event in Sean Strickland, the crazy Sean Strickland. The last top vendor, almost a $7 betting favorite, 6.5 today.
No, you're telling me a guy who couldn't put enough volume on Jared Cannonier is going to put enough volume on Israel Adesanya? A guy who had the power disadvantage against Jared Cannonier, and I mean, everybody he's fought, he's had a power disadvantage. He's going to have a power advantage against Israel Adesanya? No, he's got a power disadvantage. He's got a volume disadvantage. Unless you think he's going to go in there and wrestle, which I don't believe even for a second he's going to go in there and wrestle. He thinks he's the better striker. I mean, I don't think you can back Sean Strickland. I don't think you can back him at any price.
It's tough. I'm trying to get there, but it seems very hard to get there with Sean Strickland. Dan, appreciate you as always, my friend. Eagles coming to town. Get a win. Those Patriots up there as they begin NFL Week 1 as well. There he is, everybody. Give him a follow on Twitter as I do, or X, at Gumby Vreeland. When we come back, we've got Britton Hess in studio to wrap up UFC 293 right here on First Strike. We roll on this edition of First Strike here from Circus Sportsbook in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. Dave Ross joined by Britton Hess. We pulled him out behind the glass to help break down UFC 293. You can follow him on Twitter or X, as I do, at Britton Hess. You weren't a big Twitter X guy, and now you're in the game. How does it feel to be out there with the masses?
You
like
know,
it?
It's good. You know, I like to see all the bad opinions that generate content all across the social media sphere. I like to contribute when I can.
That's basically what it is. It's a cesspool. It is.
But it's content creation. You know what I mean? People don't have enough to fight for in their lives, so they got to defend their favorite athlete, their favorite movie star, in total contrived situations made by morning talk show hosts.
I will get on there sometimes and fight for Tom Cruise. Let's get to this card here over in Australia. We talked a lot about it with our guests throughout this program, and I'm just wondering where you side on it as well. When you have foreign cards, if you will, right, how much does it affect? Because we know what the UFC does. They're going to stack fighters from at least close in proximity. We're going to see this certainly in the main event and the co-main event here. Do you look at it and say, if I think that a fight's going to go the distance, I want to kind of be on the side more than likely on the quote-unquote home fighter?
Yeah, I think that for the most part, that's the safe bet just because of the crowd noise. The crowd's going to be every jab the home fighter lands is going to get a bigger cheer than a huge right hand from the visitor, so to speak. So I think that it has been your handicap. So if there's a fight that you like to go the distance, you probably want to side with the hometown guy. Although there is at least one fight on this card where I'm kind of leaning the other way.
Well, what fight might that be? Where you're going against the home flavor.
Yeah, that feels like Jack Jenkins versus Chepe Mariscal.
Okay.
So Chepe Mariscal, his first fight in the UFC was against Trevor Peek, who's kind of one of the young up and comers, who's one of the most exciting fighters in the organization. Mariscal is a journeyman, fought in all these lower organizations all over the world. Expected to be kind of an easy finish for Trevor Peek, but the guy's got like 20 pro fights. Peek had under 10, and he was able to weather the storm and then win a decision. Jack Jenkins, finishing machine until he got to the UFC. Contender Series win by decision, then a split decision, then a decision. Mariscal is not going to be afraid to go deep in this fight. Jenkins was we see it all the time, right? We see guys, oh man, this guy's 10-0 with 10 finishes.
Right.
And then they get the UFC and it's like, oh wait, those punches and kicks that put people on their back.
There are levels to this.
Yeah, in a regional organization don't do anything anymore. So I do think Mariscal's live in there as a dog. I think Lou was on that as well, which I love to see that our handicaps are aligned. But yeah, so that's one way of I'm kind of going counter the narrative of back the hometown fighters. But like I said, when you're getting plus 170 versus a guy who's way more experienced, who a guy's not going to be intimidated by the crowd, and a guy who's already kind of upset the UFC apple cart, he's not going to be afraid to play the spoiler again.
Let's get to another fight that I think you might be going against the local flavor, and that would be with John Makdessi against Jamie Mullarkey. Do you really think that maybe Makdessi could be live here? Because right now you're getting over 2-1 if you want to back the dog here.
So Makdessi, throughout his UFC career, both these guys have been in the octagon plenty. We have got a lot of good numbers. Makdessi lands more strikes per minute. He's more accurate. He gets hit less, and he is more. He eludes more strikes. He's almost got 70% striking defense. That means only 30% of the strikes his opponents throw are actually landing in some way, shape, or form. So Mullarkey is not a physical specimen. He's a guy that, if he has time to have a game plan, which he does on this, so that in this fight, so he's, it's not going to be like he's upset when he had a newcomer in his last fight and, lost as like a $4 favorite. But I just think that Makdessi's been around. I think that, there's a slight reach advantage for Mullarkey, but I don't think that his physical skills are overwhelming enough that a guy like Makdessi, who's been around forever, seeing everyone, is going to be outmatched in this fight. Like, I think that, Mullarkey minus 258, probably going to be closer to minus $3 on, by the time the fight goes off. I see him more as like a minus 150, minus 170 in this matchup. So it's more just a value play that, like, I don't really see.
Mullarkey's nose tells you that he's been hit a lot.
Yeah, he does. And he's a guy that's going to land a lot. I mean, Makdessi's not exactly the greatest, power puncher in the world, but I think that, he's going to be able to land just as much as Mullarkey, if not more. If the numbers would historically, hold up in this match, he's going to dodge more strikes and land more strikes. So, he might have a shot in this. It's not like I'm not rushing to say, oh, it's a lock, huge misprice, but I do think that there's value on Makdessi.
So maybe wait too, because you think this number could get more inflated on the Mullarkey side before we get to Saturday in Australia, and maybe you can get even a better price tag on Makdessi?
Yeah, no, I think that there's going to be people who are just going to be parlaying all the hometown fighters. So I think that there's going to be exposure on that side for the books. And like I said, Makdessi is a veteran. He's been around. He lands a lot of punches. And Makdessi was KO'd in his last time out. So you want to see the guy's chin return before you just assume it's back, right?
I'm right there. I'm picking up what you're putting down there. There's nothing better to a big fight card, certainly like we have one here at UFC 293, when you get off on the good foot and you win that first fight of the night. And you might have a dog. Dogs did not bark in France at all. But you think maybe we got a Bellator a guy fighting on the Bellator platform that's now moving up to the UFC, and Kiefer Crosby is a guy to keep an eye on?
Yeah, well, he's going against, Kevin Jousset, a French fighter. I don't know why he wasn't on the card last
how
week.
is he, why isn't he there?
Who's, his resume is Hex Fight League and, regional promotions like that no one's really ever heard of. Versus a guy who's, Kiefer Crosby, who's got some Bellator wins under his belt. He's been under the bright lights. This is a step up for, being the first fight on the early prelims is a step up for Jousset.
It is.
For Crosby, this is probably, this isn't even close to the biggest spot he's been in. As a dog, I kind of like it. I mean, I like experience, and I just think that, a guy making his promotional debut versus somebody who's fought in the second biggest organization is kind of a interesting spot as a dog.
So maybe look to that first fight of the night here to get off on the good foot with a dog play in Crosby. Let's get to the main card here. And it feels like right now we've got maybe some split analysts here when you look at Anton against Tyson Pedro. And Pedro here, we get it. We understand that's going to be the local flavor. And the crowd certainly is going to be rooting for Tyson Pedro. But maybe are you looking at the other side on this one?
Yeah, no, I am. I'm liking Anton, the action man Turkali, because he's 0-2 in the UFC, but he's fought
Pleasure Man.
Yeah, the Pleasure Man.
Yeah.
He's fought two of the best fighters, or two of the hottest prospects in the division, versus Tyson Pedro, who had a 2-year injury layoff, came back, got some flashy wins versus huge names like Harry Hunsucker and Ike Villanueva, who are proverbial punching bags. And then when he's fought people with a pulse, he's lost. And I don't even know if you can say that Modestas Bukauskas even has a pulse. He lost to him in a decision. So it's Turkali is durable. He did get submitted by Jelton Almeida, but that's just going to happen to most people.
Well, yeah, it's Jelton Almeida, right?
Yeah, I mean, Almeida's doing it to heavyweights. So, what it is. But I just think that, I don't think Pedro is going to be able to get the finish. And I think once it gets to a round and a half, he's just going to be looking around oh no, what do I do now? And then Turkali's got almost 7 takedowns per 15 minutes in the octagon so far. And that's against good wrestlers. So, I mean, he's got a chance to grind this out.
Now, you mentioned the gas tank there of Pedro. And again, 2.5 here, if you think this fight ultimately could hit the cards, well, you can get almost 2-1 just for the fight to go to the distance. Do you worry about Pedro gassing in that we could look at Turkali maybe getting a finish here?
Yeah, I would like Turkali to get a finish more than I would like this going the distance, just because Pedro is going to be trying to impress the hometown crowd. He'll be probably taking big swings. He might get punished for it. But I think that either way, somebody should get finished here. I don't think the contrarian over is the worst thing in the world, but I think the move on Turkali to go dog to fave is the right move. And 2, I think that win by finish at almost 2-1 is a good spot.
Got a couple more minutes here with Britton Hess before we round out this edition of First Strike. I do want to get to, I don't know if there's a more popular fighter, certainly in these parts of the world, maybe in the UFC period, as Tai Tuivasa is. I was in Chicago, saw him do the shoey firsthand. It's a big deal over there. Is he going to be doing the shoey here as almost a $2 betting underdog against Alexander Volkov? We know Volkov's got more skill. It's just that Ty's got that bam power, and if he can get to you, he can get you out of there.
I think that you see my notes. I put Tuivasa's got an NFL style, not for long. Just he is kill or be killed.
Right. He almost got Cyril Gane out of there, but he couldn't.
But he couldn't. Volkov is going to be similar to Gane, that he's really good on his feet, great crisp boxing. He's going to have a 5-inch or so reach advantage. And the thing is that Volkov lately, he's been saying, I don't want to wait anymore. You know what I mean? He's been starting his fights early, and he's got 2 back-to-back round 1 finishes against 2 powerful guys in Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Alexander Romanov. I think that Tuivasa can run at him, but I think that he's going to eat a straight left, straight jab that's going to knock his head back. And I think that Volkov is probably going to win by finish. And honestly, I'd be surprised if it goes beyond the first round.
So maybe would you look at a 10-1 sub?
So there's something. So if for some reason Tuivasa gets desperate and tries to shoot. Because when you have somebody with this height advantage and the reach advantage,
standing guillotine.
Yeah, standing guillotine. We see it all. We actually see it quite often with strikers who are oh, we didn't even know they knew some jiu-jitsu. I don't think Tuivasa is going to shoot it on purpose. It's only if he gets rattled and he's desperate. I think that there's a chance that could happen, but I like KO and first round take KO much more.
30 seconds. Any shot for the mercurial Sean Strickland against Israel Adesanya?
You can there's a shot if he does something that we've really never seen him do, which is fight smart for the full fight, against a guy who's actually more talented than him. Sean is like a bully. He beats up guys that are not in his class, and then when he meets someone at his level or above, he kind of loses his cool and gets punished for it.
Can't stress this enough. The great job that Britton Hess does, Rob does, Moreno behind the glass. Everybody here, the First Strike crew, absolutely fantastic. Thank you to Britton, Lou Finocchiaro, Jordan Sherwood, and Dan Reeland. Enjoy 293. We'll see you next week right here on First Strike.